one camera invent a whole genre and change how humans see the world? Before the Leica, some claim that photography was confined, posed, and heavy. But in 1925, a small German camera transformed everything, seemingly. For the first time, street photography became a tool for truth. The Leica didn't just shrink a camera, it actually also shrank the distance between photographer and subject, between observer and life itself. Photographic truth was no longer staged. It was lived, spontaneous, and documented. And it's no accident that the world's most honest photographs came from the world's smallest camera at the time. In this video, we'll see how a simple piece of gear turned the act of taking pictures into a gateway for empathy and human connection. So without further ado, grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's dive into a video where we'll be discussing Leica and also how Leica in a way birthed the concept of the invisible photographer. Photography was akin to painting at first. Large format cameras were the standard, and these demanded tripods, patience, and the careful granting of permission. You didn't capture life, but rather in a way you staged it, because society expected photographs to be precise and composed, resulting in images that reflected how we wanted the world to look, not necessarily how it truly was. This is not to say that small cameras didn't exist before the so-called Leica revolution, nor is to say that there weren't photographers out there that were the exception to the rule. For instance, the work of Eugene Atget, who actually was a photographer photographing Paris right at the turn of the century with a large format camera, and whose photos are, very well known and very well respected. But we're talking about a time where even portable options like the Kodak Brownie, introduced around 1900, were designed for the casual snapshot, but lacked the sophisticated optics and rapid operation. Oscar Bernack, an engineer at Leitz, originally developed a prototype in 1913, recognizing that the 35mm cinema film already used for motion pictures could be repurposed for still photography. This clever adaptation meant photographers could suddenly carry dozens of exposures in a compact roll, changing their workflow from individual glass plates or large, expensive sheets to quick-fire, reloadable film. And according to an article I read, most photographers were simply testing the camera's capacity to document and often manipulated their images in the darkroom to create the desired effect. When the Leica arrived, it simply disrupted not just the medium but also the mentality of the photographer. Suddenly, anyone, or rather those who could afford it, could carry a camera in their pocket. According to the same quoted article, the Leica handheld camera was a ticket to allowing a photographer to be on the move as well as to capturing movement. For the first time, you could walk through a city unseen, observing life unfold without interruption. As Henri Cartier-Bresson described, quote, "I prowl the streets all day feeling very strung up and ready to pounce, determined to trap life, to preserve life in the act of living. Above all, I crave to seize the whole essence in the confines of one single photograph, of some situation that was in the process of unrolling itself before my eyes." And I believe that this ability to disappear that these cameras offered then changed the very nature of photography and the workflow of many photographers. The Leica camera allowed photographers to move through streets and capture moments that could come and go in the blink of an eye. And for the first time, photographers could vanish into the crowd, and in vanishing, they rediscovered humanity in a sense. Not the version that would pose for the camera or be very aware of the camera's presence, but the other version that was simply living before it. And actually, we've arrived now at the central point of the video, or where my original idea comes from for this video, which is I believe that there's a great connection between the adoption of these cameras, of the Leica cameras in general, the small 35mm format, by different photographers, that led to the birth of this idea of the invisible photographer, that today it's still quite prevalent. So it's a connection between past and present and hopefully future. And so I wanted to kind of break down this idea of how one change in gear or in the workflow can actually lead or led to a very interesting philosophical and changes in the approach to photography. And so given all this information, of course, I think we can tie the importance of Leica with this idea of the birth of the invisible photographer, one that many define by this idea of being in the moment, by empathy and proximity with the reality and its subject, and not in control. In fact, Henri Cartier-Bresson spoke of the decisive moment, describing it as a simultaneous recognition in a fraction of a second of a significance of a given event. He also wrote, "The creative act lasts but a brief moment, a lightning instant of give and take, just long enough for you to level the camera and to trap the fleeting prey in your little box." Photographer Robert Capa put it even more simply, this idea of capturing the philosophy of proximity, with his famous quote, "If your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough." And Capa's approach was actually one to really immerse himself in the stories he documented, believing both physical and emotional closeness made images more authentic. So we can argue that the first Leicas here didn't just allow photographers to get closer and develop different and more personal styles, they also, and more importantly, made photographers invisible. So this concept of the invisible photographer is the idea that the photographer becomes part of the story without altering it, without controlling it or directing the scene, due to his or hers more discreet presence, which in turn led to an ethical shift in how we look at others. And I believe this is interesting to also talk about, because if we are seeing things from a different perspective, arguably closer, or rather, if I was a photographer back then, our work, or my work, would become less performative and more intimately connected to my vision of the world and to what I interpret, what I want to put in my images. As in, like, what kind of situations I want to focus on, what kind of themes or ideas. So I also think that we can say that photography becomes not just more personable or personal in this case, but also more intentional. What does it mean to see but not being seen as a photographer? And when we photograph people without their explicit awareness, do we reveal more truth, or do we risk putting something uninvited into our photos? And today, we photographers are offered the privilege to move even more unnoticed through public and private realities. So we can say that the Leica era marked the beginning of candid and unstaged documentary photography, but it also required photographers to reconsider ideas of consent, dignity, and the power dynamic between subject and observer, as well as the responsibility that one bears in creating a more, I would say, accurate portrait of reality. Today, with even smaller cameras and smartphones, these types of questions become even more relevant, because we can ask ourselves, how are we using this granted invisibility as photographers, and what is our responsibility in the way we create images and circulate them in public forums? And I actually would argue that for me, someone who's not super into gear, as you can tell by the more philosophical approach of this video, one of the most interesting discussions is precisely around this ethical legacy that happened in connection with Leica. The idea that invisibility is not just a technique, but also a position that comes with said responsibility. So it's all very interesting to discuss, but equally very interesting is as well how we, beyond capturing those images, share them with other people, clients, collaborators, friends, family, whatnot, and also how we present them to these types of connections that we have. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about Picdrop, and not only thank them for sponsoring this segment in this video, but also thanking all of you that very generously were sending me your work through Picdrop. When you're working on a long-term project or even a quick street session, how you organize and deliver your photos can make all the difference, and Picdrop is a platform built specifically by and for photographers. It lets you create beautiful galleries, share work with clients or collaborators, and gather feedback all in one place. I found Picdrop perfect for presenting cohesive series of images to collaborators, and it seems like I'm not the only one, because many of you shared your galleries with me, and I'd like to shout out a few of them. Gaetan creatively used Picdrop to share with me the work of a photographer and painter I've never heard of, Ivo Zeniavsky. And I cannot lie, his paintings were absolutely amazing, as you can see. But then Johan was also someone who shared his photography with me, and I took an interest in particular to his vibrant and energetic photos of Vietnam, out of which I loved this particular colorful scene where street chaos is front and center. And last but not least, I was super impressed with the abstraction of Emma's photography. Emma is a photographer from Hong Kong, and in my opinion, I think her photography is of course very beautiful because of the abstraction it produces based on all the patterns that she observes and all the attention to detail in the carefully composed images that she presented. And so you can check the work of all these photographers and many more that have shared their work with me via Picdrop through my website. And so if you're interested in trialing out a more, smoother, I would say, and more professional way of presenting your work, I'd recommend checking out Picdrop. The link will be in the description. So let me know if you agree or disagree. I was definitely not trying to glaze on Leica. I was just kind of making this video more so a sort of conversation in which I kind of put across my thoughts, and hopefully it resonates. Let me know what you thought of all of this. And of course, this is not to say that you can't make amazing work with any other camera. Of course you can. I have plenty of videos about these types of topics that are coming up on the channel. So I'd like to thank you so much for sticking with me today and for watching the channel and supporting my work. It's truly, truly appreciated. We're reaching the end of the year, so it's been a full year full of different videos. You might want to check out the playlists of the channel, and if you like filmmaking, you can check out my second channel that I've been posting as well. Different videos there on different actors, different, filmmakers and whatnot. So yeah, I guess that I'm very grateful for you spending your time today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe, keep shooting, keep creating, keep learning photography, and I'm out. Peace.